Well, you know probably better than I do, right? That some people, when they hear these stories, maybe they're a little cynical and they think that it kind of glosses over, right? Kind of what the reality is. Like I say, I remember that maybe in kind of a certain day, at least amongst some officials, if there was a policy debate, you might have someone go do the study. It might be a think tank. They had a high reputation. They ran the numbers and they would say, look, the numbers are the numbers, right? I mean, they say, the tax cut that was done had this effect and right, and all that. And by the power of that analysis, then people would have to kind of say, well, I can't really speak against, the numbers. But I wonder if you feel like maybe the storytelling is a easier or better way to do it, just in terms of how you feel like engaging people. Do you actually think the storytelling ends up being better than trying to crunch numbers for them? And what I'm trying to separate it out is that maybe it's easier because it is a storytelling and they can remember that. Maybe they don't have to work as hard, if I could put it that way. But what do you feel about like kind of those two different approaches?
Yeah, look, I appreciate storytelling because I do think that it is what often sticks with you. But I will say that I think that the approach that I see a lot of success with is a marriage of data and storytelling.
Mhm.
So yes, it's important to crunch the numbers because I think people do depend to some extent on that statistical proof of the concept. But to make that data come to life, it's really important to paint a picture for folks. And I think that's true no matter where you are, if you're on Capitol Hill or if you're in Akron, Ohio or Lenore, North Carolina. People love and really can relate to stories. And I do think that the storytelling can help make some issues that maybe aren't as, that are maybe seen in a more partisan way, resonate differently and make them more accessible to people to, kind of help both sides of the aisle come together. Because you and I have talked about this too. There's such a, it feels like there's such a partisan divide right now, and sometimes these stories can help bring folks together. One example that I think is really meaningful here is, looking at climate, right? Climate is something that I think for a long time folks have really assumed is an issue that only Democrats care about, Republicans don't, and I don't think that it's helpful to look at it that way. But I also think that it's not always helpful to approach the climate debate from a perspective of what we have to give up to make things better. What if we tell stories about company impacts on farming communities that are at risk of losing their livelihoods due to a warming planet? That story might very well resonate with someone who has been left behind by the traditional climate discussion. So maybe instead of presenting what we need to give up, we present more of a climate positive future that really welcomes all stakeholders to the table.
That's really interesting. And I guess if I'm hearing you right, the storytelling not only makes it, a little more graphic and easy to remember, but maybe it pushes through the initial information that people got. Like maybe climate change isn't real or it's exaggerated, or I don't know, right? Whatever people might hear. I'm not trying to judge climate change, but what I thought I heard you say and wanted to see if I'm right, that story can kind of make them think a little bit more about it, maybe dwell on it a little bit, and use that as a way of figuring out how they feel, maybe rather than just a first impression. And you would think the data probably isn't very good at doing that, right? Moving people off their first position, but a story might.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things that, in the PR and communications world is, if we're writing an op-ed and we're trying to highlight a specific data set, and we're talking maybe about a problem that's costing American taxpayers $14 billion a year. Okay, you can say that, but is there a way to maybe make that number come to life? Like, I'm just making this up, but $14 billion, that's equivalent to the annual GDP of X, small nation or something like that that helps people kind of put it in context. And so I do think that sort of the combination between the data and the story that brings it to life can be really, really important. And it does set I think our clients apart from those who are just crunching numbers and just presenting a statistical data set.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if I might add, and those who are just telling stories because that's the story that wants to be told, right?
Sure.
Sounds like you're finding that middle ground.